Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are starting on chapter 1 of the Nectar of Devotion. So chapter 1 is called the Characteristics of Pure Devotional Service. In the introduction, we didn't touch on it, I think, so deeply. A large part of the introduction deals with the definition of pure devotional service. So this chapter is the characteristics of pure devotional service. And in the introduction, Srila Prabhupada is commenting on Rupa Goswami's definition. For a large part of the introduction, he's commenting on Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotional service. So generally speaking, when things are like explained or described, the first thing that'll be described is the kind of like set the mood and the spirit of approaching the subject matter, and then what you can gain from it. So this chapter that we're going to be getting into now, the characteristics of pure devotional service, this is like the inspiration. Because if we don't have an inspiration, there's the living entity won't do anything. Like we only do things if we have the inspiration to do them. And so these it's going to go through 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, and these things are meant to be, and they are naturally very inspirational in terms of attracting our minds to become interested in pure devotional service, in practicing pure devotional service. Just before we get into that, though, I just wanted to touch on the definition that Rupa Goswami gives, just quickly. So there's one verse that Rupa Goswami, he defines Bhakti, devotional service, as activity that is favorable to the transcendental pleasure or the pleasure of Krishna. So doing some activity that pleases Krishna, and is free from, when it's performed, the mentality is there's the performer is not trying to get any material result from it or trying to gain liberation from material suffering. The only desire is to please Krishna by that service. That's what the desire is, and that's actually how the first chapter starts. That the first paragraph is quoting a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, where it's described that pure devotional service is the nature of it is that the performer, the devotee, is the only desire that they have. They don't want anything in return for their service. The only thing they want is to be able to do more service, to bring Krishna more pleasure in whatever way that he pleases. So this is actually, it's mentioned there, this is the primary characteristic of devotional service, that is devoid of desire for anything else. The only desire is simply that the devotee wants to render the service, wants to render more service and in this way please the Lord. So let me just, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, and in that section there, then Srila Prabhupada, he describes that this devotional service in the introduction, how devotional service, it's different from, it's not just like an inactive meditation, anything like that. There's devotional service is activity, but it's positive activity, and it's activity specifically, and then he gets into the details of what kind of activity it is, but it's activities for the pleasure of Krishna. And so he describes some of those things, like he describes the mental activities of Krishna consciousness as being thinking about the activities and the pastimes of the Lord, and always thinking about what can I do that would please Krishna. So it's just like in any relation, you know, in a loving relationship, when there's love there, then the two people are thinking, oh, what can I do that would be nice for this other person? Maybe I can, you know, make them something, you know, something that they like, or maybe I can get them this, or maybe I can, you know, do some simple service for them, you know, it could be anything. But the mentality is that they're thinking, oh, what can I do that would please the other person? So this is one of the activities, mental activities of Krishna consciousness, is what can I do that would please Krishna? So then all these activities, they are given to us by the previous teachers in the line of Bhakti. So the activities are not just, because Krishna is a person, and so Krishna has things that he likes. He has things that he likes, but we don't know. Being in our state of somewhat or complete ignorance, we don't know what it is that Krishna likes. And so we learn from those who do, which is the saintly persons and the teachers, the self-realized souls. They know what Krishna likes, and so they're giving it to us. That's what the nectar of devotion is, actually. Rupa Goswami is giving to us part of the nectar of devotion. He's giving to us those activities which Krishna likes, which are favorable to Krishna's pleasure. And so that's one part of it, is the activities, and the other part of it is the consciousness in which they're done. So we can still do the activities. Like, for instance, one activity that Krishna likes is when we chant Hare Krishna. So this is actually recommended as like the most favorable activity. But still, when somebody chants Hare Krishna, they may be doing it in a consciousness that, oh, I want to get something from this. I want to get peace of mind. I want to get a material result. So there's the activity, but then there's also the consciousness that goes with it. So the pure devotional consciousness is that I'm simply doing this for Krishna's pleasure. So so the activity is proper, but the consciousness is also proper. So what we're talking about here is pure devotional service. This is the goal. So if we don't know the goal, we have to know the goal in order to know what we're trying to attain, where we're trying to go. We aren't there yet. And so there's stages along the way to get to the goal. And that's described in the Bhagavad Gita quite thoroughly. Can't remember, but it's at least in this section of the Nectar of Devotion, the chapter we're going through, it's not describing these stages. It's just describing what is the characteristic of pure devotional service. So the devotional service that it's devoid of all types of material contamination, no material desire involved. It's purely for the pleasure of Krishna. So this is, so we're going to go through these 6 characteristics, 6 things that when pure devotional service is performed, that these 6 things are like symptoms. These 6 things are what's experienced. And the pure devotional service, yeah.
Sorry, just to quickly mention, you mentioned Bhagavad Gita. Well, the end of the 2nd chapter talks about transcendental position, like a person on a transcendental platform. And also in the 12th chapter, when Krishna describes the Bhakti, when Krishna goes into devotional service, he does also list the qualities of a pure devotee in the activity.
Yeah.
So just
So it's
that reference there.
pure devotional service it's there in the Gita for sure, but the Gita also goes through very thoroughly all the different levels of our consciousness as we progress in devotional service. So pure devotional service, I was just going to make the point that, and this was brought up in the beginning, that we can do pure devotional service at any point in time. We can like consciously do something for Krishna's pleasure, and only for Krishna's pleasure. And when we do activities in that consciousness, then this is these 6 things that we're going to be talking about. This is what's experienced, and also it's eternal. It's never lost. And so when we do something, an activity in pure Krishna consciousness, then that activity it brings us to a certain stage, and then it's always there. So the next time we do something, it brings us to a higher stage. So our consciousness gradually develops, and it doesn't go down. So that level of advancement stays with us. So yes, the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. Okay, so the first one, and I think this is, actually this one Srila Prabhupada spends the most time on, and perhaps also in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's the most time spent on it. But the first characteristic is relief from suffering. So we can know that we're performing pure devotional service if, it's a characteristic of pure devotional service, is relief from suffering. So Srila Prabhupada, he goes and gives a philosophical description of how suffering occurs. And he says that the cause of suffering is a result of performing sinful activity. So this goes back to our Isa Upanishad studies, understanding that the world in which we live, there's an arrangement there. And so when we do activities, we get a result. That's karma. So if we do proper activities in terms of the material world, we get a good result. And if we do improper activities according to nature's arrangement, then the result, improper activities, or in the Nectar of Devotion, it's called sinful activities. The result that we get is suffering. And generally, Srila Prabhupada says there that generally we perform, so one may ask the question, why would we do something and bring suffering to ourselves? Nobody wants suffering, so why would we do something like that? So he says that it's generally due to ignorance, that we actually are unaware of how things work, and so we have this tendency to commit these activities in ignorance and get the reaction in the form of suffering. That's one thing, but the one point, so there's different he goes through a description of how sinful reaction, there's different kinds of sinful reactions. There's 4 different kinds, but the one that he stresses on the most, because this is the most important one, is that one of the results when we perform sinful activity, actually when we perform any activity, when we do that, the desire to do that activity again is seated in the heart. So when we perform some activity, then we get an experience. And through that experience, there's a seed that's planted in the heart to do that activity again. So Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that, so we're in the material world. When we have material consciousness, when our consciousness is impure, then it means that we have this tendency toward material activity. that material desire is there. We want to enjoy materially. We want to enjoy separate from Krishna. And he gives an example. He gives a few examples, but he gives one example of one example he gives is of this is a traditional Vedic example of the elephant. So an elephant goes and it bathes in the water, and then when it gets out of the water, it immediately throws dirt back on itself. So there's no meaning to the bathing, because it just does the same, it just gets immediately dirty again. And Srila Prabhupada also uses the example of how someone may contract a disease from engaging in sex life, some kind of STD. One may get something like that, and then he's suffering, the person is suffering, so they get treatment and they get free of the disease, but the desire to engage in sex life is still there. And so they again do it, and they again get the disease. So this is like the material world, is that we do something, we suffer, but because the desire to do that thing is still there, until that desire to engage in material activities is removed, then we'll do it again, and we'll suffer again, we'll get the result again, and it just keeps going on and on like that. So it's said that pure devotional service, it burns up all the reactions to sinful activities. So it burns up the reactions, like we may have done something and we're going to get a reaction for it in the future. So those things get eliminated. So we don't get those reactions that are supposed to come to us, like we killed somebody a few lives back or something like that, and we're supposed to get it in this life. So that gets, when we take up pure devotional service, those things, all those sinful reactions get burned up. And also the main thing is that the desire to engage in material activity and sinful activity, this gets taken out of the heart by Krishna consciousness. And so there's one point to mention here, is that I don't know if you've heard the term mind over matter. Yeah, so the idea is that in the Vedic, in the Western idea, the first you have the material, and then you have the more subtle things. Like you first, in the Western science, they say that consciousness is born out of matter. So first you get the body and all the the material elements, and then you get the more subtle things like mind, intelligence, consciousness, intelligence, mind. It's just certain chemicals are firing in certain ways. But in the Vedic concept, first you have the subtle, first you have the consciousness, and then you have mind, and then you have matter. So when they say mind over matter, it's that the mind is actually more powerful, that it can influence the matter. So similarly, you have the mind, but actually above the mind is the intelligence, and above the intelligence is consciousness. This is what Krishna says in the Gita. So when the consciousness is properly situated, when the consciousness is spiritual, when we're Krishna conscious, then all of the other things get affected. So suffering and sinful activity, this is in relation to the body. This is in relation to the material world, things that we do in the material world. The suffering we receive is Prabhupada gives some examples: legal implication, chronic disease, things like that. These are the results of these types of activities. And so, but he's saying that actually when the consciousness is situated properly, then all of these things get transformed, they get changed, they get burned up. So when we become Krishna conscious, and this is the first characteristic that's mentioned here of Krishna consciousness, pure devotional service, is that all of this suffering, all of these sinful reactions, they get burned up, they get obliterated. And another aspect to that is that Krishna, he says that I remove all these things. So another aspect to that is that from the Vedic viewpoint, you know, God is in control of everything. So if he wants to do something because he's in control, then he can do it. So he says that I'll remove all these things. So if you take up Krishna consciousness, I'll remove all these things. So that's another aspect of looking at it. I don't know if I'll get into this. I don't think I'll get into this here. It's just the sin. I do want to mention this because generally we have most of our definitions in the West, even if we don't like haven't been to a church, or like our parents didn't go to church, most of our ideas of like concepts, definitions of things like sin, for instance, is coming from the kind of like Western Christian idea, like the Protestant or the Judeo-Christian definition of it. But in the Vedic definition of sin, is simply if it means to go against the nature of something. So proper activity in the Vedic definition is defined as if you know the nature of something, you deal with something according to its nature. So like, for instance, putting a whole bunch of salt into a what is it you make, Jade? Almond bars or whatever. Instead of putting sugar in there or dates or something, you put a whole bunch of salt. From the Vedic viewpoint, that would be called sin, because you're going against the nature. It's the nature of a sweet. You know, you don't put salt because that's not the nature of salt. You know, you put salt in salty preparations, you put sugar in sweet preparations. So the Vedic viewpoint, sin means to go against the nature of something. And ultimately, the nature of the living entity is that the living entity, its nature is to be a servant of God. And so anything against that is considered sinful from the Vedic viewpoint, from the absolute viewpoint. So this is the first characteristic of pure devotional service, is that it relieves one from all types of suffering. Is there any, before we move on, is there any comments, questions on that? That's the biggest one. It was the most kind of philosophically involved. Does that make sense? Does it make, okay. So then the
it's nice. Yeah, because I've been reading the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, like by itself, and it's nice how Prabhupada is taking all these concepts and putting them together. Because sometimes, like a book like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu can be quite technical, or like I was explaining to you, like a textbook. He's listing many things. He's listing many things, right, and quoting from the Shastra. But like Prabhupada, through his summary study, he's bringing all these ideas and making them flow nicely together. You know, like right, the cause and effect of each other. Like that one performs these. Like there's definitely more explanations there in the summary study. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I don't know, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is there as many examples? Because Prabhupada, he gives quite lucid examples in.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Prabhupada is saying is directly from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but it's mixed in with the explanations.
Yeah, okay.
But Prabhupada will add explanations and will bind the concepts together. But like all the citations.
So this
is from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Like you can really follow it.
Mhm. So this is the first characteristic of pure devotional service, is relief from all suffering. So this is, this would be fantastic. I don't think anybody would disagree with. In fact, this is, everybody in the material world is essentially endeavoring for this relief from all suffering. And so this is the formula. The Nectar of Devotion is giving us the formula how to actually get free from all suffering. So the next characteristic is that pure devotional service is all auspicious. So there's two different ways that it's approached. One is that it's mentioned that it's all auspicious because devotional service is it's of benefit for everyone. It's known as the highest welfare work, and this is because it benefits, not only does it benefit all human beings. There's not one person that wouldn't be benefited by devotional service. Whereas there's lots of types of welfare work, like for instance, feeding the poor. There's lots of like charity work in that way. But if you brought that food to a rich person, it wouldn't benefit them in any way because they already have, they don't need it. But devotional service benefits all people, all places, all circumstances, and not only all people, it also benefits all animals, plants, all living entities are benefited by coming in contact with pure devotional service. So it's known as the highest welfare work. And this is one of the reasons why it's all auspicious. What's more to that is in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, he, in the beginning, in the first chapter, he sees that he's about to fight this battle and that many people are going to die. And so naturally, because he's a devotee and he's a soft-hearted person, he becomes compassionate because he doesn't want to see all this suffering. He doesn't want to see all this suffering. But Krishna in the second chapter, he reprimands, he calls Arjuna a fool because he said your compassion, there's nothing wrong with the compassion, but he said your compassion is misplaced. So this is in connection with this section, but we have to, because another characteristic of devotional service being all auspicious is that by practicing pure devotional service, all the good qualities, it's mentioned in one verse in the Bhagavatam, all the good qualities of the demigods, they manifest in a person who's practicing pure devotional service. And this is another reason why it's all auspicious, because good qualities are considered to be very auspicious. And so these qualities, as we practice devotional service, they will manifest if we're practicing properly. These things will manifest, but we have to be careful, like Arjuna, to not misplace them. So Krishna, he calls him a fool. He says, your compassion, yes, his compassion's coming because he's a pure devotee, and so compassion is coming out of his heart. But he said, your compassion, you're placing it on the body, which is the body. The body has a due date, an end date. It will die. So compassion should be towards the soul. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada gives the example: if somebody's drowning in the ocean, and you save their clothes, but the person drowns, then what good did you do? So this is the same thing. You can do all the good you want to do for the body or for the mind, the intelligence. There's so many psychological welfare, for keeping the mind in a good state. But without doing something for the soul, then the rest of this ultimately has no meaning. Not that these things aren't part of Krishna consciousness, taking care of the body, taking care of the mind. But if we neglect the soul, like if we just take care of those things and we don't take care of the soul, then on the absolute platform, it's not considered real welfare. So this is Krishna consciousness is real welfare because it does good for the soul, which is eternal good, which eventually gets us free of the material condition, of the body, of the mind. And so eventually we get free of all these problems, which is mentioned in the first characteristic, that we get free of all suffering. So it's all auspicious because it's the highest welfare work. It does good for the soul. It does the eternal good for all living entities. There's no limit to it. It's not good for a certain group. It's good for all living entities. And it, by practice of devotional service, all the good qualities of the demigods manifest. And this is because as we practice devotional service, we purify ourselves, we purify the consciousness, and we actually uncover the soul. The soul by nature has all of these good qualities. So as we properly practice devotional service, all of these good qualities, they'll manifest naturally. Not that we have to separately endeavor for them, just simply by practicing pure devotional service, they manifest. And this is the meaning of all auspicious that's mentioned here. So that's the second characteristic. Anything on that before we move on? Yes. Okay, Jay,
just wanted to say, like, every day when I chant without fail, my dog sits with me and listens. And I always have this like hope that in his next life, like this will benefit him and like level him up, you know? And it's kind of like,
yeah.
Practicing, it benefits everybody. Like it can only be good for him to hear it.
For sure. And Lord Chaitanya asks, he asks Haridas Thakur. So Haridas Thakur is known as the acharya, or the teacher, the preacher, the practicer, the primary example of chanting. He chanted Hare Krishna for like 22 hours in a day, like all day. That was like his main occupation. He chanted 192 rounds. So one round is 108 mantras. So that's one round, and he did that 192 times. So 192 times 108, and that it basically takes your whole day. So that's what his practice was. So Lord Chaitanya asked him, because he was, the teacher of the holy name of chanting Hare Krishna. He asked him, how can even the plants and the animals be benefited? And he said, yes, by chanting. The thing is that the soul, that's it. So we're a soul in a human body. Your dog is a soul in a dog's body. So in the human form of life, yes, we have the ability to practice spiritual life, whereas a dog doesn't have that ability. But the soul is still there, and the soul also has senses. And so when we chant, that soul is hearing and is being benefited, and will have will get benefit for its next life. Any living entity, when engaged in devotional service, they're benefited for sure. And this is like, for instance, we offer our food to Krishna. So every living entity that's involved in that gets benefited by that process. So yes, yeah, definitely. So this is the meaning that devotional service is all auspicious. There's no limit. It can benefit all living beings. No matter what the material situation.
Point, when you each point you're going through, I'm just excited to show at the end. I've made a chart with all of them. I like doing
Okay,
those
okay.
visual images. So I'm
Okay,
looking forward to show you that chart.
yes,
at the
yes.
end.
The next ones are not so long, but I'll make sure I leave at least like 5 minutes for that. That's, yeah, okay. So the next characteristic of pure devotional service. So if we've gone through relief from all suffering, it's all auspicious. Now it gives one transcendental pleasure, happiness. So Rupa Goswami, there's happiness, but he breaks happiness into 3 categories. And so these 3 categories, these will include anything that we consider happiness. So one is material happiness, the happiness we get in the material world by, our material endeavors, getting material things, or having material interrelationships, interactions with people on the material platform. So that's one kind of happiness. The second kind of happiness is the happiness of liberation, of merging into the impersonal Brahman, of spiritual liberation from the material world. And then there's the happiness of devotional service. So this is beyond liberation. So he says these first 2, the difference between these different types of happiness, or essentially the difference between the happiness that comes from devotional service, which is what we're describing here, and the happiness that comes from the material happiness, or the happiness of liberation, is that material happiness and the happiness of liberation are temporary, whereas the happiness of devotional service is eternal. And he gives an example of this, Srila Prabhupada and maybe Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that impersonalists, even though they may attain impersonal liberation, they may actually merge with the impersonal Brahman. At some point in time, you will see, and actually if you go to India, you see this a lot, that there's some big, guru or some big spiritualist, but he's doing some material welfare work. He's opening some hospital, or he's feeding the poor, or he's doing something good, some good material work. And this is because, and so this is the reason why impersonal Brahman, the happiness one gets from it, is temporary, because it doesn't fulfill all the needs of the soul. And so because the soul is desiring this relationship and this activity, so because he doesn't know about devotional service, which is relationship and activity on the spiritual platform, then he has to come back down. The impersonalist has to come back down to the material platform to have material interaction, relationship, and activity. And so he does it, he tries to stay in the higher mode of goodness, in these activities that are considered, kind of like nicer and better. But it doesn't, it pales in comparison to the happiness of pure devotional service. And the main point that Prabhupada brings out here is that these other 2 are temporary happinesses. Oh yeah, there's one thing in there that I really liked. Yeah, there's no happiness lacking in devotional service, because a person who's performing pure devotional service doesn't become attracted to doing anything else. Whereas a person on a personal Brahman realization, he becomes again attracted to material activities. And a person who's attracted to material activities is changing all the time. Oh, now I'll do this, now I'll do that. Oh, I did this, I got some happiness, but now it's worn out, so I'll change it to something else. So it's always temporary, it's always changing. But devotional service, a person can go on, for instance, I'll just use the example of chanting Hare Krishna, since that's kind of like the prime activity Srila Prabhupada mentions in another place. It's the prime activity in the present context of devotional service, is that One can go on chanting forever and be completely satisfied and not feel the need to have to do anything else. If we're chanting properly, then this is the result, is that we don't feel like I have to do anything else. And so, but this is not true of any other kind of happiness. All other types of happiness, it's like, oh, I have to do something else. I have to do something else. I have to do something else. So this is the characteristic of pure devotional service, is that one doesn't feel like one is completely satisfied in those activities. One doesn't feel like one has to do something else. The other thing is that I won't go there, but it's related to our Isha Upanishad classes. So we will move on. I'll just go through the last three quickly so we can get to Damodar's slideshow here, not slideshow, his image here. So the next quality, so that's the happiness of devotional service is above these other two, is it's very rare. So there's a couple reasons for this. It's rare because one thing is that you have to get it, devotional service, the only way we can acquire it is from a devotee. We have to get it from a devotee. There's no material activities that we can do. There's no amount of austerity. There's no amount of penance, sacrifice. There's no amount of making juices, or no amount of anything we do. There's no amount of cutting firewood that's going to produce devotional service. Devotional service, we can only get devotional service from a devotee. We have to get devotional service from a devotee. So that's one reason that it's rare, is because a pure devotee it's mentioned there that it's one is considered very fortunate if they meet a pure devotee, because it's rare. It's rare that the pure devotees, the material world is not the place where they don't want, there's nothing for them here. Pure devotees, they're satisfied, but Krishna and his pure devotees, they feel compassion for the souls in this world because they see that we're suffering. And so they come here and they want to give us a way to get free of suffering and reconnect with who we actually are. So, but it's considered that one is considered very fortunate when they come in contact with a pure devotee, because we can get this pure devotional service. And the other reason is it's rare. Krishna, he rarely gives it. Personally, he rarely gives it, because if he gives it, and this is going to come up in the last one, he's giving himself, because devotional service is attractive to Krishna. And so if he gives somebody the power to perform pure devotional service, then he will himself be attracted to it. And so essentially he's giving himself. So this is another reason why it's rare. There's the fifth characteristic is that one has no attraction. One who's performing pure devotional service has no attraction to the conception of oneness or impersonal liberation. And Rupa Goswami mentions here, and I really, really, really liked this. He mentions that the happiness that one gets from pure devotional service is 1 trillion-fold the happiness one gets from impersonal Brahman. And actually, this is just to give some comparison, but actually there's no comparison. There's actually no comparison, but just to give us some, our minds something to chew on. He's just basically saying like, there's no comparison, like 1 to 1 trillion fold, like there's absolutely no comparison between the two.
The example used is that in the Bhakti Rasamrita, there's that one half of a lifetime of Brahma, lifetime of Brahma is 14 trillion years.
Okay.
So he's saying
Okay.
half of
yeah,
a life. So 7 trillion years, like he says half of a lifetime spent in Brahman happiness. So like, let's say 7 trillion years in Brahman happiness does not compare, spent in Brahman happiness does not compare to one drop of the ocean of Bhakti.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really liked that he made that.
So how can we count the amount of drops in an ocean? No, it's like
right.
Each drop is worth more than a trillion.
And it's described that like the oceans on our planet are limited oceans. Like they do have they're finite, but the ocean of devotional service is an infinite ocean. It's a shoreless ocean. So the happiness of impersonal Brahman is not even a drop of the ocean, the unlimited ocean of devotional service. And then the last characteristic is that that pure devotional service attracts Krishna. And I hope that you had a chance to read through this chapter, because there was some really nice, and this comes up throughout the Nectar of Devotion, like there's a lot of reference to the scriptures to give, essentially in the West, we don't like, the Vedic scriptures don't really mean much to us in terms of an authority, but in terms of any Vedic school of knowledge, when you're making a point, it has to be backed by Vedic authority in some way. So in all of these examples that Rupa Goswami is giving, he's also he's giving verses from different Vedic literatures to give proof of these things. And also there's really nice examples, personal examples to illustrate these things from devotees' lives. So I hope you had a chance to read through the chapter, because there's some really nice examples. Like for instance, in this one of that pure devotional service attracts Krishna, he gives the examples of the Pandavas. So the Pandavas were Krishna was their cousin, and he was also he was their friend, and he actually, so essentially you have Krishna, who's God, the supreme person, and he's interacting with you just like any other, person in your life, like your friends or your, and he's doing stuff for the Pandavas. He's taking a message from here to there, or they're just sitting down and having a good time together. So Krishna, he's the thing is that so it's mentioned here, he's attracted by pure devotional service. So Krishna, he's attracted to be in the association of those who are pure devotees because of their quality of consciousness, their quality of devotional service, their qualities in themselves, because this is essentially the platform that Krishna interacts on. So the devotees are thinking, they don't think for themselves. All they're thinking is, how can I bring pleasure to Krishna? And Krishna, so this is God, this is the platform that he operates on, because God is always thinking, how can I do good for my devotees? And so until we come to the platform of being completely selfless, like how can I give pleasure to Krishna without any thought of any, selfish thought, then Krishna becomes, when we get to that platform, then Krishna becomes attracted, because that's his platform. That's how he interacts, because he's completely selfless. And so it's mentioned there that the embodiment of this is Srimati Radharani. She is the topmost devotee. She has this consciousness to the topmost degree. And so the devotees they take shelter of her to learn this, and to learn this characteristic of pure devotional service. So that's our position, is that, essentially what we're hearing about here, we're hearing about these things. And there are devotees that are on this platform. So our position is that we're just trying to learn from the devotees that are on this platform, and we're trying to do something to serve the devotees that are on this platform, so that they become pleased enough with us that they will impart this devotional energy, this devotional qualification to us. And actually, this was mentioned in the introduction. It was one thing that I thought was really important, that devotional service, it doesn't start until we are accepted by a spiritual master, until we are accepted by the devotees. There's nothing we can do to get to Krishna. There's nothing that we can do. We have to be accepted into the realm of Krishna's relationships by a devotee. And so this is the spiritual master.
That's also
so I'll stop there.
Again. That's also mentioned again in later chapters, when Rupa Goswami starts mentioning like the qualifications of one taking to Krishna consciousness, or how you should take, or how does Krishna consciousness start, and those are mentioned that like one of the first principles is accepting a spiritual master.
We have to accept a spiritual master, but we also have to be accepted by a spiritual master. It's a relationship, so both ways have to be there. Because there are examples of people just accepting a spiritual master. In fact, it's a major religious tradition, actually, that one accepts. You simply have to accept this personality. But the question is, does he accept you? Right? So there's a relationship there. We have to be accepted by the devotee says, yes, I accept this person. I'm going to help this person become Krishna conscious. So it goes both ways.
Thank you. That was a nice point there. So I guess it's my turn to show
yes.
little images there. Sorry, I'm a little bit excited about it. It's a way for me to study. Like, I like doing these things. It helps me to. I'm a visual person. I like to put things visually. It's my way of studying. So hopefully I can keep producing some. I put some in the.
It helps
Nectar
others
devotional
also.
resources. Okay, I put some in the Nectar devotional resources. I started the site put there. So the class, the history and introduction, I put the Rasamrita Sindhu, the overview of the book. This is not necessarily the overview of the Nectar devotion, because Prabhupada he organizes the chapters differently. And the reason for that is that some chapters are like very long. Some chapters are very long, and here in Prabhupada, he breaks it down in pieces. But the division of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the example, it's of an ocean, the Eastern Division, Southern Division, Western Division, Northern Division. And so the first chapter, it's a relatively short chapter. It was of the qualities of pure bhakti that we've discussed today. And then it goes into the practice of sadhana bhakti. That's, for example, is a long chapter. It's 300 verses in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada breaks it up like in 15, 16 chapters. And actually, part of our introduction to bhakti, we're just going to cover up to that. I would like personally, at some maybe other point, going deeper into all of these and like studying it together. But in the introduction to bhakti course, we're stopping here at the end of sadhana bhakti. But there's a lot. There's a lot to uncover there. And then it goes into bhava bhakti, bhakti and ecstasy, and then bhakti and love of God. So kind of like he describes bhakti. Then after that, he describes rasa. So the book is Bhakti Rasa Mrita. So he spends like 1/4 of the book talking about bhakti, but the rest of the book is rasa.
Okay.
That's like the heart and soul of bhakti is rasa. So what is rasa constituted of? What makes rasa is the bhavas. So there's like a vibhava, anubhava, Sadvika Bhava, Vyabhichari Bhava, and Sthayi Bhava. There are the different modes, different ecstasies of actually people in prema. You can actually see, like he describes this. He describes bhakti and love of God, prema, but the rest of the book is all about those experiencing prema. Like the real people that are experiencing rasa are the pure devotees. And but what exactly is that? So then he describes the rasas. Like for example, every primary rasa have a different permanent aesthetic mood, like a different sthayi bhava. One sthayi bhava, his permanent ecstasy, defines his rasa actually. So there's a primary rasas, which are neutral love of God, which is servitude, also dasya ras. Fraternal devotion, Sakya Ras, and then parenthood, Vatsala Ras, conjugal love, Madhurya Ras. And then there's the secondary rasas. At the end of the book, he describes different part of the ocean, which is laughing, astonishment, chivalry. For example, Bhishma Dev had chivalry. He liked to fight with Krishna. Compassion. He was a servant, but he liked to fight with Krishna. So then there's compassion, there's anger, there's fear, dread, ghastliness, like disgust. Those are all secondary ras. And then he talks at the end of compatible rasas, and incompatible ones, like sometimes shouldn't mix together, and also incomplete expression of rasas that are not fully expressed. And these are kind of higher subject matters, but it's nice to study them and get into it. Like he uses a lot of examples of different moods. It's not necessarily that we try to use those moods, but
this is a beautiful chart. It just like just by looking at this, I got like a complete idea of what's going on in the whole book. Your abilities are really wonderful.
I like to summarize things visually, and what I like is I don't know if you can see in the background, it's like waves of the ocean. Okay, but I'm getting distracted because the topic of today is this one, is like the 6 characteristics of.
Oh, okay. You actually okay.
So nice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And an interesting point that it became more clear by looking at the Bhakti interesting detail that was there is that actually 2 qualities become manifest at each level of bhakti. So removing of the stress and
yes, that's right. That's right.
Comes from sadhana bhakti. Yes. And then when one, there's removing the stress. And then if you look at removing the stress, there's what the causes of the stress is sinful reaction. So there's sinful reaction from past lives and those sinful reaction from this life. In Bhakti, in Rupa Goswami, every time he cites something, there's a quote associated with it. Like he cites this. Yeah. And he gives an example of this, and gives an example of that, and cites from scripture. A lot of the Bhagavatam often then removes the stress, but also, like you're saying, and Prabhupada was explaining, that's related to material desire. The seed of sensual reaction is material desire. So, and ignorance. All those are connected. Rupa Goswami gives a verse for each one. How Bhakti removes ignorance, how Bhakti removes material desire. And Prabhupada quotes the same practice. And like he explains them all together, how actually the ignorance is the source of all of this. Then auspiciousness is defined as 4 things, but also he says etc. is defined as affection for all living entities, and attractive, like a person who's in Bhakti, he develops affection for all living entities, and also he becomes attractive to all living entities. So these two words. And the possession of good qualities, like we're mentioning, that he starts developing good qualities, and also happiness. A devotee who practices nicely develops all these things. He becomes free from distress, but also all types of auspiciousness comes in his life, and becomes happy. And actually, says that there's 3 sources of happiness: from material enjoyment, from Brahman realization, and from Krishna. And actually, all are available for one who practices. But I guess that's like on a
one doesn't. He makes that point. You don't miss. The thing is, if you take the pure devotional service, you don't miss anything. You don't miss any type of happiness. You don't have to worry that, something will be missing.
And then characteristics of bhakti that start developing on the higher platform of bhava bhakti, where one starts, bhava bhakti will be explained later, but it's one starts experiencing the ecstasies more profoundly of bhakti, and it makes liberation look insignificant. When one starts tasting really the ecstasies of bhakti, and when liberation looks like grass. Even a little attraction to bhakti makes liberation look like grass. Then what to speak of material enjoyment? So one who has actually tasted the bliss that comes from bhakti. Is that, and it starts happening on the bhava stage. And actually, Prabhupada described that. Rupa Goswami described that bhava bhakti. Actually, I don't think Rupa Goswami says it explicitly, but I think the commentaries, like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, them will explain that it's actually bhava bhakti that's more rare to achieve. Like, because when Krishna starts giving bhava bhakti to somebody, that's when Krishna becomes he's not far from prem. Once you're in bhava bhakti, you're really not far from prem. It's like almost like sadhana bhakti, you're practicing. It's like you're studying. Now you're at university, you're studying. Bhava bhakti is like an internship. You have an internship in a company. You're not far from being hired. So bhava bhakti is like this idea. You're not far from achieving perfection. So it's really
mind the time, Damodar.
What? I know. Okay, I'll
mind the time.
Yeah, it's getting late. Okay, yeah.
It's past
I'm going fast.
You should have given the class.
No. Look at this.
Come on.
I just wanted to finish this. Sorry. And okay, but just this last point. Finish this. It's really achieved that even if one practices without attachment, like if one does not develop attachment for Krishna, he will never obtain bhava bhakti. And our goal of sadhana bhakti is to become attached to Krishna. That is our goal. So we have to develop that attachment. When we develop that attachment, maybe Krishna will give us more. But unless we develop that attachment, we can never attain higher levels of bhakti. Even if practice with attachment, like even if we have that attachment, Krishna will not give himself immediately. We're still like, and then 5. So 5 and 6 is in Prema Bhakti. It's composed of a unique condensed bliss. Like the bliss that one experiences from bhakti is not compared to any other type of bliss. And that's where the examples of trillions of years of Brahman bliss can't compare to even one drop. So it's the only means to attract Krishna. Krishna is addicted to prema, and then that implies that prema controls Krishna because he's addicted to it. Anyways, I like showing it like that visually, but this detail here of these qualities manifest at different stages, like that. And what's great is that even at the beginning of our practice, we can start experiencing these first 2 qualities. That's what's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry for taking that extra time there.
I think.
Mr. Bird, do you have any
I think we
comments
should.
to add?
We should finish. We're
Okay.
over time here.
Well,
I was thinking to finish.
I'll stop the recording. I'll stop the recording.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
I
The
was
class is over.